Each year, athletes from across the globe converge on Haines City, Florida, test the limits of their bodies and the resilience of their spirits at Ironman Florida 70.3. This documentary invites you behind the scenes of an athlete's return to triathlon after a forced 4-year hiatus, a story of grit, ambition, and unwavering dedication. From early morning swims to relentless training rides beneath the hot and humid summer sun and pounding footfalls on winding roads, we will witness the evolution of a competitor with a humble and grateful heart striving for redemption. But this is more than a race. It is a voyage through adversity and triumph. Through moments of doubt and bursts of inspiration, there will be setbacks and surprises, victories large and small, and the discovery of the true meaning of perseverance. Join us as we chronicle the milestones and missteps, the sweat and celebration culminating in one unforgettable day. This will not only be a tale of athletic determination, but a portrait of the human spirit, undaunted, unbreakable, and ever reaching for the extraordinary. Welcome to Ironman Florida 70.3, an endurance athlete's journey. Welcome, everyone, to Ironman Florida 70.3, an endurance athlete's journey. I'm your host, Coach Justin. We are at the end of week 7 of a 16-week plan in preparation for Ironman Florida 70.3. This week, I had a planned training plan of 19 hours and 20 minutes. So that is a beefy week, to say the least. I went back into my database to look and see some of the highest weeks that I've had, and this week ranked in the top 3 of my highest volume weeks. I actually executed 18 hours and 5 minutes of it, so I didn't get the third highest week. I'll have to go back and find out exactly where it falls, but overall it was a successful week. Last week was a rollback week. And so now that that's done, it was time to get back to work. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have been as aggressive as I was. I believe that the previous week before the rollback week, so that would have been week 5, I had a planned week of 18 hours and 10 minutes. Then I rolled into a rollback week, which decreased training volume by about 25% in most of the primary components of the plan. And so what I should have done is I probably should have gone back to coming out of the rollback week, gone back to the 18 hours and 10 minutes. Instead, I actually beefed it up some more. So that was just an overlook on my part, and I'll own that. But it was an aggressive week, to say the least. So this it was challenging and kind of emotional at the same time. So there's more to come on that later on in the video. But first, let's jump into the week's training. So let's talk about the run for the week. This week, I had some intensity in my runs. You can go on to the Tabula Rasa Racing website and go to the page that's dedicated to Ironman Florida 70.3. You'll be able to see what my training plan was for the week, and you can see kind of the structure of the runs that I had. I did some progressive runs. Normally, that is an approach that I use, but this time I kind of went a little bit of a different direction. And one of the runs, I was increasing pace every minute on the minute within the interval, rather than just having the overall run interval be the same pace and then increase that pace when I go to the next interval. I did do that in several of my runs, but I did a little bit of an expansion, and some of the shorter runs had increases every minute on the minute. And so those are really engaging runs. I like them. Because, typically I will do them on the treadmill. And so it keeps me engaged, keeps me connected. And, it's easy to do kind of like a higher intensity if you know that you only have to do it for a minute. And then you're kind of ramping up to where that low zone 2 to high end zone 3. And you're like, I can hold on to this just for a couple more minutes because I know that I spent some portion of the interval in zone 2. And now that I'm kind of pushing it up into zone 3, but I know that I have a recovery coming up. So it makes it a little bit easier mentally to execute. Whereas if you use the same pace for the entire duration of the run segment, so it requires a little bit more focus, even though you're running at the same pace and on aggregate, you're running the same kind of minutes under that pace, it's a little bit harder of an effort. And I'll talk a little bit how one of those runs went. But that minute on the minute increase was done. It was on, let's see, that was done, I think, on a Monday. It went well. I enjoyed the run. Tuesday's run, though, was a little frustrating. It was done in the evening, which is a little bit hard for me. I don't particularly like evening runs, mainly because I'm kind of going into them fatigued after a long day. And so during one of the segments, I felt a little twinge in my hamstring, and it was in my left leg. It kind of threw off my gait a little bit, but it wasn't enough of an issue to really kind of like stop executing the prescribed intensity that I had. That was one of those runs where I was increasing on the interval. So, it was a little frustrating, when you're running and then all of a sudden you feel something kind of just like pop and just not feel right, and it kind of throws things off a little bit. I didn't back off on the intensity, but I did keep it in my mind. So I knew that, okay, if this persists, because it just kind of happened the one time and then it kind of like eased off a little bit, but I couldn't get that full stride. So I knew that if it continued to persist throughout the interval, that I was going to have to back off. But it kind of eased a little bit towards the end of the run. And so I didn't feel like it was something that I had to be too concerned about. And I wasn't going to change the training plan because of it, because I knew the next day I had an easy zone 2 run. So rather than kind of like push that run to the upper ends of zone 2, I kept it at the low end of zone 2 just to kind of try and keep it relaxed, and because the hamstring was still pretty tight the next morning for my morning run. And so that was kind of the only adjustment that I made, but I was still within the prescribed intensity zone that I had set. I just wasn't as aggressive within that prescription. I also know that I had a massage later that day on Tuesday. So I was able to kind of spend some extra time with that hamstring. The masseuse was able to get in, kind of like work on it a little bit. She said it was pretty tight, but after the massage, it felt good and it wasn't too much of a concern. So because of the little twinge in that hamstring, I'll talk about how that impacted my strength training for the week. But like I said, no additional adjustments were needed throughout the week for the run training. I was able to execute all of my structured runs. My Friday run was harder than I expected. Again, it was one of these structured runs where I was increasing pace at the interval. So I still had 6x2s, so there were 6-minute intervals with a 2-minute walk in between. And so, I increased pace every interval. And even at the low end, kind of like when I'm starting out, I always feel like that's a hard interval to do. The body is still not completely on the same page as everything else. And you're trying to tell us like, no, we've warmed up now, so it's time to get to work. And so it usually takes that first interval to kind of like flush the legs a little bit and trying to get them to wake up even more. But, and it gets easier as the run progresses. But this time it just didn't. It felt hard throughout each interval. It really didn't get easier. And in fact, because of the increasing pace interval over interval, it was getting harder and harder. So those last few were done at paces that I don't normally hit. And so they were like, I would call them kind of like really high zone 3, maybe starting to get into the low end of zone 4. And so, they required some focus. And, there were a couple times where I had to tell myself, we are not quitting. We are not slowing down. You're going to have to suck this up and push through it. I believe that there are times when that kind of mindset is needed, and it's absolutely needed on race day. So sometimes it's good to have those kind of efforts in a workout during the preparation for a race, because it really does start to allow you to practice that mental toughness. You're trying to teach yourself to kind of like block the discomfort without getting to the point where you're in pain. Was it uncomfortable? Yes. Was it painful? No, not to a certain extent. I wouldn't say that there were like any sharp, like stabbing pains, but it was uncomfortable and required some self-talk to get that executed. But I dug deep for it and executed the structures of the workout the way it was prescribed. I was glad. It was one of those runs where I was glad it was done when it was done. So one of the things that kind of happens is that, on that Friday run, it was done late in the evening. So it had already been a really long day. We had logged on, Coach Katie and I had logged on to record a podcast episode. We had a guest on, and so it was the first time we were doing a guest, and this was the guest's schedule that he could have, that he had. And so we had to log in and record Friday evening. So it was kind of like, late afternoon, early evening, kind of that time where, I probably was getting close to like logging off of my full-time job. And normally I would have just like packed my stuff and just headed out to the gym and got it done. But, it took us, a good solid hour to record the episode and then kind of like get myself together, get everything broken down, and then head off to the gym. So I didn't get there until it was significantly later than I usually do. And I was tired and kind of hungry and I was just done for the day, but I still had this, I think it was like 65 minutes. So it was an hour and 5 minute run to do. And I just wasn't in the mood. And so when you're going from a workout that's like that and you have another workout the very following morning, and the following morning is going to be, it's one of my shorter runs, but it's also my long ride day. So I do that run and ride combo on Saturdays. And so I wasn't quite sure on how Saturday's run was going to go and how I was going to feel because I had such a challenging run the night before. And I told myself going into it that we're not going to push the pace. We're not going to look for some kind of confirmation of paces that I can hold for the race. We're just going to go out and I want you to run relaxed. And so this is what I'm telling myself, is just to kind of go out and just execute it. Run relaxed, run free, and don't even worry about the pace. So I didn't even look at pacing when I ran on Saturday. I just went totally by feel. I still recorded it on my watch and everything else, and I still have all the data. And so I know what it was after the fact, but I didn't know what it was during that. And so all I was looking at was just time. And so I said, these are the intervals, and I know when I had to turn around because it's a point to point. It's just an out and back route. So I knew when I was going to have to turn around and just head back, but I executed it well, actually. It wound up being a really consistent run. So after that initial kind of like warm up segment, the 3 intervals were all ran at the exact same pace. And then the last interval that I had was faster. So I consider that a major success, especially after the run that I had the previous night. And I felt good. I felt relaxed, and, I felt confident. So it was a really good way to end my run week, given how the runs went during the week. So I kind of, ended that week on a high note, even though, it was a challenging, intensity-filled week of runs. Next week, my plan is I'm going to increase my run interval, going from 6 minutes to 7 minutes. So I've removed the intensity. I'm going to keep everything at zone 2 and kind of see how the 7-minute interval goes, keeping rest the same. And so we'll talk about that next week on how that goes. So the next segment is the bike segment. Overall, this was a good week on the bike. On Monday, I struggled a bit with the evening session. What I had done is I did weights in the morning, I did a run at lunch, and then I did a bike in the evening. And so what I found was when I got on the bike in the evening, my legs were still pretty tired from the run that I did at lunchtime. And so it forced me to take a look at how I execute Mondays and Wednesdays, which that's the common schedule that I have for Wednesdays. I have a strength session, a run session, and a bike session. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test out this new execution strategy where I'm going to run in the morning, I'm going to do strength at lunch, and then do the bike in the evening. I'm hoping, here's the thought process behind it, is that I'm hoping that by the time I get to the bike segment, my legs will be recovered from the run that I did because I'm doing them early in the morning. The only caveat to that is on Wednesday, I have leg day in the weight room. And so I'm not quite sure how that would go, but my evening bike on Wednesday is a nice, easy zone 2 ride. So I structured it that way because I knew I was going to be doing leg day in the weight room. So I purposefully made the run and bike easy that day. But the Monday is going to be kind of like the tell-all on how that execution strategy goes. So I'm kind of curious on how it's going to work. My Wednesday evening ride was a good leg flush, like I was just talking about. I had a massage earlier in that day. So what I ended up doing is I like having that bike in the evening, so where I can kind of like flush, because I'm pretty sore after a massage. She does a lot of deep work into those muscles. And so the legs can be actually pretty sensitive for a couple days after that massage. So I like having that bike session in the evening, which is a nice little leg flush to kind of loosen them back up after kind of sitting and working or whatever, after the massage. So I'm going to keep that strategy kind of going forward on try and have my massages done on those days to where I can do a nice, easy bike spin in the evening on the trainer. Just kind of flush those legs out and get them prepared and ready for the next day of training. Thursday was my big gear session. It is a challenging workout. It's the one now where I think it's an 11-minute big gear interval, but there are 2 minutes within that where it's kind of like a hill sprint where I go into zone 5 and I just kind of push it hard. But there's no recovery. So it's like, kind of go a couple minutes and then boom, you hit that zone 5 segment and then you go right back into still big gear, but it's just lower cadence, lower effort, and you back down into the zone 4. But there's really no recovery that's in that interval until you get to count at the end of the 11 minutes where you get a break and then you start it all over again. My legs were feeling it for a couple days after that ride. That is a challenging session. I do like the 2-minute zone 5 effort in there, because the last time that I tried that workout, I had like 3 attempts at the hill sprint, and it was at the 3, 6, and 9-minute mark of the 11-minute interval. And I knew after the first time that I tried to execute that, if you go back and listen to last week, that it just wasn't I wasn't there fitness-wise yet in order to execute that. And so the remainder of those intervals, I did just the 2-minute, but this time I kind of put some real structure behind it, programmed it in Training Peaks, so where it told me what the zone 5 interval was. And so it cued me on when to start it. It was a challenging session. It's something that's going to stay in the library though, because I like it. I like the intensity. I like the focus that it gives me, and it's going to generate, I believe, some good results in building that muscular endurance. One of the things that you learn is that, a lot of runners will come to me and said, what should I do in training for this race? And then if they have a particular race that's in mind, what I tell them is that, okay, if you have hills, run hills more often than not. So if you have to choose between running a hilly route and a flat route, always go hilly route. Your pace is going to be slower, but running hills helps you on hilly courses and flat courses. Running only flat courses is only going to help you prepare for a flat race course. Same says for the bike as well. So the more big gear that you can develop, that you can put into your training plan and build that power and that muscular endurance, the better overall cyclist that you're going to be. You're not going to have those cases where you have to crest a hill and then you really lose a lot of momentum and power because you are forced to recover and then kind of like spin it out. If you can get your legs to the point where they're strong enough to where you can crest that hill and you just kind of like, you get back into your normal gear and you get that normal cadence back, and you just take off. And I believe that is the preferred approach that you want. That's really what you're looking for. And I believe that a lot of big gear work in the training plan helps achieve that. So I went into my Saturday ride, still feeling a little bit sore from the Thursday session that I had. I could feel it all on my quads, like the whole front of my high thighs, they were tight and sore. So I knew that I was going to have to kind of like, prepare myself and kind of spin a little bit early into the ride. I felt good because of the run that I did before the ride. So my legs were pretty primed up and ready to go by the time I actually got on the bike. And I believe that the run helped with that. But my long ride was fantastic this week. I had a planned 4-hour ride. I started in Varina, Virginia, where I normally start, and I made it all the way to Jamestown in Williamsburg and then back again. So I got 79 and a half miles on Saturday, and I negative split the ride in all 3 metrics. So I look at power, cadence, and speed. And power, I look at average and normalized power as well. All of those metrics were higher in the second half of the ride than they were in the first half. My average power was in zone 3. My normalized power was in zone 4. And cadence was solid above 80. and my speed was I actually generated more speed than I have in any of my rides that I've done so far. So this was the fastest bike that I've done to date in this training plan. So I think I averaged about 19 miles an hour, which I'm not quite sure what my expectation is for the race itself, but it's too early to kind of like judge that on, whether that's a realistic effort, given that I'll have to run a half marathon after the bike. So I'm not quite sure, but it is confidence building that, at this stage of the plan that I'm able to generate that kind of progress on the bike. So I'm super happy with that. I executed my nutrition plan perfectly. I ate and drank everything that I took with me. So I was able to get in the 60 grams of carbs per hour. My replacement rate was still a little on the lower side. I think it was about 38% of the calories that I burned, I replenished during the session. I'd like to see that number a little bit higher, but if I have to trade off calories for carbs, I'd rather have the carbs than the calories. So when I sat down that morning to kind of plan out what products I was going to be using and the schedule that I was going to be executing, how often I was going to be feeding, and, so I said, let's go with this strategy. I'm going to be a little bit lower on the calorie, but this combination of products gives me the 60 grams of carbs that I want per hour. Really, at this point, I'd really like to see that number a little bit higher. I'd like to start getting into like around the 65 to 70 grams of carbs per hour. But right now, 60 is working for me. And my only concern is that right now I'm doing a 4-hour ride, and I'm able to get through my 2 liquid bottles fairly easily within the within the training session. My question then becomes, can I get through those same bottles on race day with a shorter duration to drink them? So I'm hoping for around a 3-hour bike segment for the race. So that means I need to get through 2 bottles, or I need to get through a bottle every hour and a half. And so right now, because I'm riding 4 hours and I'm getting through 2 bottles, that bottle is lasting me on average 2 hours. And so I've got to find an hour in there somewhere to try and cut that out and get through that bottle. I think right now I'm not pushing that, because the way that my routes are set up is like I'm gone for the whole 4 hours, and it's going to get upwards of 4.5. So the question then is going to become, well, then how do I just take a third bottle that I don't plan to use? Actually, that's a good idea. Just take a third bottle that I don't plan to use, stick it in the back of my jersey, and have that, and then test out my ability to get down 2 bottles in the 3 hours, and then I'll still have a bottle of nutrition to last the balance of the ride. So actually, that's something that I'm going to execute next week and see how that works, because I really kind of want to see if my body can absorb two liquid nutrition bottles within 3 hours, because that's what I want to do on race day. And right now I'm far enough away from race day, because right now we're about halfway through the training plan. So this is week 7 of a 16-week plan. So I'm just shy of 50%. It's a good time now to start testing that method. I really do need to kind of sit down and say, okay, I need to drink every 10 minutes. I need to drink every 15 minutes, and kind of come up with a plan. Because what I find is that if I don't have a structure like that, I drink to thirst. And if you're drinking to thirst, in my opinion, you're already you're opening the door to not being able to get in everything that you need to get in the time that you have available to get it in. So what I typically would recommend, and what I try to do, is have the bulk of my feeding done on the bike. But I have to be careful on my body's ability to absorb it during those efforts and the intensity in which I ride. And so what I found is that sometimes if I'm trying to get in this nutrition and I'm riding at a high intensity, I start to have some GI issues, and it sabotages my run. So it's what I've seen in the past. I've seen it during races. I've seen it during training sessions. So it's something that I have to practice, and I have to train my gut. So we'll talk about next week on how that new nutrition strategy is going to work. I was trying to practice with the 2 bottles, but 3 bottles I think is going to do me, because I have a longer training session than I plan to be on for the bike for the race. I've been experiencing some foot pains during my rides. And so what I started to feel is I started to feel kind of the metal plates within my shoes on the balls of my feet. And so the insoles that they put in bike shoes are super thin, just like your run shoes. They're really thin and they wear out pretty quickly. So what I did was I went to a local run shop and got some running inserts. So they're highly cushioned inserts, and I put those in my bike shoes, and I said, I want to test this out and see how my feet feel in the shoes with the inserts, because sometimes it can make the shoes feel a little bit tighter because the insoles are thicker. And so you can't really kind of like ratchet down on the tension on the shoes to give your feet some more room than what it usually has because of the thicker insole. But the insoles are doing really, really well. I enjoy the feel of it. My feet feel cushioned, and so I'm not getting the same kind of level of fatigue during my bike session than I was. So that was a good experiment. I had a successful result of that experiment, and so I'm excited with that finding. There was no Sunday gravel ride this week. We had rain move into the area, and it was just going to be kind of a rough, kind of nasty, unreliable day. And I didn't want to be out on the trails in that kind of condition and risk injury or tearing up the trails. And so I replaced it with a structured bike ride on the trainer just for convenience. You can go onto like I said, you can go onto the website and you can see what that workout was. It was a pretty intense workout because the gravel rides are pretty intense, actually, because there's a lot of hills that are on the route that I usually ride. And so I wanted to keep that level of intensity there. So you can go and check that out. Overall, it was a successful bike week, and I'm looking forward to the coming week of more bike training. Swim. So this is the next segment is the swim. Overall, it was a good week in the pool. My Monday session felt good. Those are the 250s. So that the quality of my Tuesday session has improved by me increasing from the 100 intervals to the 250s. A lot less transitioning between, paddles and buoys and everything else and just straight swimming. So that has cut down on the time that I actually spend in the water, not necessarily swimming, but I do like the 250 interval distance. That's a nice solid distance. It feels like it moves the workout along a little bit. So that Tuesday felt good. The next swim that I would have would be on Friday, and I was starting to feel it by then. This is the week that I would normally cycle back on to my anti-inflammatories, and I was feeling good because I had a massage this week as well. And even though I was tired and the training was high, I wasn't feeling like the pressure in my joints like I normally would when it's time to cycle back on. And so I said, well, maybe this is a good sign that I can use these massages as a way to delay the onset, to delay the need to take the anti-inflammatories as soon. But that Thursday session was rough. My elbows and my shoulder were pretty hot. And so I said, well, this is just confirmation that it's time to cycle back on. So I did delay it by, I think it was just effectively just one day. But, it told me that, no, I am not better, but this is what I need to do in order to get through the training and reassess after the race is done on how to proceed with that. But this is the swim volume that I need to have to be prepared for this race. And so when the race is over, I'll probably drop down to maybe 1 or 2 swims a week, most likely probably 2. I don't like just swimming once a week. Doesn't seem worth the investment if you're only going to swim once a week. So I'll probably drop down to the 2 swims, and my body seems to handle that a lot better. So my Sunday swim is my endurance swim. So there's the longer intervals. This time they were 800s. So they were effectively 3 by 800 intervals. One is just straight swimming. One is with a pull buoy, and the other one is with buoy and paddles. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to go. The Saturday training was challenging, but I felt good. We had plans that evening to go to some friend's house to hang out for a little bit. So I got home a lot later than I usually do. I got a lot less sleep. I ended up sleeping in a little bit more. And so I wasn't quite sure on how the swim was going to go. And the way that the swim felt on Friday didn't really leave me feeling all that confident. But this always happens to me on Sunday. It's like, I say, well, I got to swim 700s or I got to swim 800s, and I don't know how it's going to go. But each time I always prove myself wrong. I get to the end of the 800. I was like, man, I feel like I actually could have kept going. I felt good. I felt in control. The swim pace that I had for just the straight swim was slow in my opinion, but I think it was effective. That's the way that I kind of wanted to approach it. I wanted to kind of just swim at an effort level that kept my elbows and shoulders in check. allowed me to execute the best form that I can, given my limitations. I still can't get that early vertical forearm that I really want with my right arm, and I still can't pull with enough power so that I can breathe to my left. So I'm always breathing to my right because I just can't get that rotation and be able to get my arm stretched out enough to where that I'm in a good position to take a breath. It's usually my timing is way off. My arm is way down in the water. And so I can't get the rotation to get that clean breath. And it's always rushed, and I'm having to like jerk my head a little bit more than what I would really want to, because then it throws my balance off, my feet splay out, and you're just over rotating. So I'm not there yet to where I can breathe to my left side. So I'm constantly breathing to my right, which does put a lot more strain on my right because that's going to be my dominant side now. So that's where I'm getting most of my pull from. And that rotation, I'm really stretching it out a little bit. And this shoulder has issues as well. But the Sunday swim was really consistent. I felt like I swam strong. I swam smooth. My Friday intervals were all consistent, executed at very similar paces for the blocks that they were done in. So the blocks that were just pulls and the blocks that were pulls and paddles were all swam at basically the same pace. And so that's really confidence building that, my paces aren't slowing as I get deeper into a workout. So I'm trying to figure out how to improve. But right now I'm just trying to get the endurance that I need so that when I get out of the water in Florida, I don't feel gassed. I've expended the least amount of energy that I possibly can, and I'm feeling fresh to get onto the bike. The last segment of the training plan is the strength segment, and this was a hard week in the weight room. Coming off of a rollback week where the weight was reduced, but the reps went up. Now I went back to where I was before the rollback week, so I didn't progress any of them, but I just went back to that same weight. And my body just wasn't cooperating. It realized that, oh, wait a minute, this is heavier than what we did last week. And so it kind of freaked out a little bit. So everything felt harder than it did before the rollback week. I was feeling pretty strong. On my leg day, I actually had to make the hard decision and skip my leg day because that was the following day after I tweaked my hamstring during the run. And so I had to take off my A-type personality athlete hat and put on my coaching hat, because this is what I would tell any of my athletes is like, look, it's not worth the risk. We need to kind of baby that hamstring a little bit. We don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize our primary focus, which is swim, bike, and run. So strength is a supplement to everything else. It's not one of our primary focuses. So I had to make the hard decision and sacrifice the strength session for the lower body. And that's where you see where I missed my planned duration for the week. The bulk of that comes from that missed leg day, and I missed two of the three core sessions during the week. I just could not get them in. And so I felt bad about skipping leg day, but I know it was the right decision to make because my legs were just feeling it. They were tired, they were tight, and they were sore. And the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, and it was just too much risk. So this has forced me to try and take a step back and look at how I'm approaching strength in this plan. So this is really kind of an experiment for me because I've never executed this kind of training plan where I'm training for a longer race. I did execute strength sessions training for sprints and Olympics, but never for a half. So this is something that's new to me that I'm trying to figure out at what point in time do we have to make adjustments, or what time do we have to sacrifice it? What approach do we use? What method is appropriate for the goals that we have? And so it's forced me to take a step back and say, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to get out of my strength training, and how do I want to move forward? Because now we are going into week 8 of the plan, which is 50%. And the way that I designed this plan is that the first half of the plan was all the build. And now the latter half, my volume basically stays set at like 19 hours. I think it's like 1910 for the balance of the plan. So this isn't a plan where it's just going to gradually increase, and then just kind of like taper off. What this does is it increase, plateaus, and stays that way for weeks, and then we taper off. So this is kind of a new approach for me. So I'm trying to figure out how I want to think about strength. The way that I've been doing it so far is, yes, I have high reps and lower weight than what I was using when I was focused on building strength. Now I'm focused on building muscular endurance, but I'm still pushing it in the weight room. I'm still trying to reach failure in that fourth set, which may not be appropriate at this stage of the training plan. So it's forced me to take a step back and say, okay, what do I want to do? I could reduce weight and not push for failure and just push for burn, like muscular burn. And, keep my reps. Don't push the reps up to 20 because I'm lifting less weight. Let's keep them around 50. Let's lift a little bit. Let's decrease weight a little bit so that when I'm finishing off, I still have reps in reserve and see how the body responds. Or I could just sacrifice legs and focus on my upper body, which is going to happen eventually in the plan, but we can do it sooner rather than later. I don't like that approach because I'm starting to think that, I'm lifting with my upper body twice a week and there are 3 days where I'm swimming. So that's 5 days. So for 5 days, I'm doing stuff that is stressful to the upper body, whether it's swimming or weightlifting. And I don't lift on the same days that I swim because I know better. So it's making me think about, am I stressing my upper body too much? Is it going to affect the quality of my swim? Is it going to affect the quality of my runs with my ability to, have a good arm swing? Arm swing and cadence go hand in hand when it comes to running, and being able to have that strong upright posture and be relaxed during the run if I'm always super tight and fatigued from the weight room. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the first option. I'm going to reduce weight and keep my reps where they're at and see how the body responds for the next week. If the body is still super stressed out and it's not absorbing it and not handling it well, then I may opt to nix strength training altogether and say, okay, well, I've spent the first half of the plan still keeping in weights, but at this volume, my body can't absorb it. And so I have to sacrifice it because it's not my primary focus. I don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize the swim, bike, and run. And so that's what comes first. And so even though I like the training, I like the strength training, I like what it does, I like how it makes me feel, I like the gains that I've made, I can sacrifice it for the balance of the plan if it's needed. Right now, I don't see that it might be needed because I want to try out this different method and this different approach and see if that works. And so I'll talk about that next week on how that goes. So let's see. So I guess we're now that's the completion of the strength training for the week. I don't have much else to say with that. So let's look at the insights that I have for the week. This was kind of an emotional week a little bit, and I was searching for some answers. And one of the questions that I'm asking myself is, why do I push myself so hard? And why did I feel the way that I felt when I had to skip my leg day? It really, really bothered me. And, I don't take rest days, even though there are some people that say, yes, you need rest days. I think there's an argument for it, but every athlete's different. And so there's a time and place for rest days. I haven't come to it yet because I have not seen a degradation in performance yet to where I'm now starting to break into the non-functional overreach phase. It takes a lot to get to the definition of overtraining. I'm nowhere near overtraining. You have to actually get to the non-functional overreach part before you get to overtraining. Non-functional overreach means that you're training at a rate and an intensity level where your performance is starting to fall off. So now you're no longer making performance gains. So you're starting to regress rather than progress. I'm not there yet because my pacing is still increasing on the runs. My power and my abilities on the bike are still increasing. My performance in the pool, while limited, I am seeing progress, endurance in the water. I'm still seeing significant endurance and performance in the weight room. So I haven't gotten to the point yet where I've reached non-functional overtraining. So why is it that I feel the way that I feel when I have to skip sessions? And part of me is saying, well, I'm always looking for opportunities for a breakthrough because you never know when that opportunity is going to show up. It could be just that one session where things just click and everything just falls into place and you get a massive breakthrough. And if I skip so many sessions all the time, I never know if that was the session that I was going to have a breakthrough. And so that's some of the issues that I've got in my own mind, my own ego. And so I own that. But I'm like, well, why do I feel that way? Why does my brain automatically go there? And so I was on my drive in the car driving to my long ride. And it's about 40 to 45-minute drive to where I start. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just throw on like a podcast, and usually it's kind of it's a sermon from a church that I'll listen to, something that's, motivating and, kind of feeds me a little bit, makes me feel good, maybe convicting from time to time when necessary, but I do enjoy that time. This time it wasn't sitting with me. I was listening to a sermon, and it wasn't speaking to me, and I felt emotional, but I didn't quite know why. And so I turned the sermon off, and then I went to just listen to some praise and worship music this album that I really liked, that spoke to me. It's gotten me through a lot of hard times in the past, and it's an album that's really special to me. And during the first song, right off the bat, I got to the point where I was actually crying while I drove, and I couldn't figure out why I was feeling this way. And I think one of the things what came to my mind is this phrase, the spirit of lack. And a lot of times you'll hear this when it comes to poverty. When people have a poverty mindset, there's just a spirit of lack. They just don't have enough. And I do believe that it's a spirit, because you can have situations where you may be in poverty, but you don't have that spirit of poverty, that spirit of lack. You still have contentment and joy. You're just limited in resources. And I believe that this is something that I'm dealing with. I remember as a kid, when I was growing up, we didn't have a whole lot of money. And quite frankly, from what I can remember and observe, it was a struggle a lot of the times. And then after my parents split up when I was a kid, it just exacerbated things even more. So there's kind of been this spirit of lack in me throughout most of my life. And it kind of like rolled into adulthood, where I was working constantly, and, I was fairly young, and I was married and already had a kid. And so, it was that drive to try and accumulate more because of the fear of not having enough. And this is what this spirit of lack is. And I believe now that, I've gotten to the point in my career where, I make a good living doing what I do. So financially, while we all have limited resources, I believe that the spirit of lack really affects me in my training, and where I'm constantly pushing for that. It's never enough. I can always have more. I always want to put more in the bank in terms of my physical fitness and my power and my ability to execute. And this is what I'm learning. And there's a verse that I looked up to kind of illustrate this. And it's Psalm 34:10. I'm just going to read it here. And it says, "Even strong young lions sometimes go hungry, but those who trust in the Lord will lack no good thing." And I believe that I found this scripture, and that it was given to me because of this realization that I got this week of the spirit of lack. And it's something that I need to pray over and ask for help for, to release me from this. Because, even strong, fit athletes who execute their plan perfectly, it always doesn't work out. They can go hungry just like the rest of us. They can have good races, they can have bad races, so it doesn't really matter. But those who trust in the Lord will be given what they need when they need it by Him. And so what I think He's trying to show me is that it doesn't matter how many workouts I execute. It doesn't matter what intensity I'm able to do. He will provide what's needed when it's needed on race day. It's still my job to do the best that I possibly can do, but that doesn't mean that I have to be held under the spirit of lack. And so this is something that I need to work on as an athlete, as a business owner, as an employee, as a husband, and as a father. So this is something that came to me this week, and it's hard to swallow a little bit. I'm still kind of working through it, and this is by no means going to be, oh, well, now I know this, so now I can fix it. I can't say that I can fix it. It's something that I need to be aware of and that I can constantly pray and ask God to help me with. But it's going to require effort on my part and, stay the course. So those are my insights from this week. I had a good week. Physically, it was challenging. Emotionally, it was challenging, but I was able to execute what I could execute, and I still pulled off a pretty good training week. This was the end of week 7, so we're rolling into week 8, which is officially the 50% mark of the training plan, and I'm excited for the next week. I'm kind of wondering on how my body's going to adjust, that maybe this week I kind of shocked the body too much coming off of a rollback week by increasing above what I was doing before the rollback. That's what I'm hoping, and that this week my body will be like, okay, we're not done yet, and there's still work to be done. So that'll be something that we'll talk about next week on how things go. So thank you for joining me in this episode. Really appreciate it. This will be a bonus cast. So it will be released on the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and it will be also available on the Tabula Rasa Racing website, as well as the Tabula Rasa Racing YouTube channel. Please go out to the website. It's tabularasaracing.com. You'll look for the page that says Ironman Florida 70.3. Click on that, and you'll see all the videos that I've done so far, and you'll see each week's training plan in the photo gallery. So each week has its own block, and then at the very bottom of the page, you'll see a downloadable PDF that you can print off if you so wish. There's a lot of content that's on this website. I have, a blog that's out there where I've written about different topics. You can check out my services, some of my coaching philosophy. I am taking on active athletes on my roster. So if you are interested in training, or if you just have questions, feel free to peruse the library of information that's on there. Check out some of the short little videos where I talk about some of my backstory. You can also hear some of my backstory on the podcast. You'll find the latest 5 episodes available on the website for the podcast. There's just a page that's dedicated to that. But I've got all my pricing, the plans that we do, and everything else. So check that out. If you have questions, feel free to send me a message. Feel free to post a comment within the YouTube video. If you have any questions about anything from week 7, you can go back to previous weeks as well and post comments and questions there. And I'll look through those. I look through them regularly just to make sure that nothing slips by. And if you guys have questions, or if there's something that you would like for me to talk about in more detail, or something that I'm not talking about that you would like to hear discussed, put a comment there and I will see it, and I will work that into the future videos for the rest of the training plan. So again, thank you so much for checking this out, and looking forward to a new week of training as we roll into week 8, the 50% mark of the plan. So thank you guys, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and happy training, everyone.